Hi, this is Dr. Kelly Fitzsimmons Burton, and this is the first episode of Retrieving Reason podcast. We recorded the episode yesterday live at Arizona State University, and I just wanted to give you an introduction and say thanks for listening. I hope you'll enjoy. Good afternoon. Hi. I'm Dr. Burton, and I teach philosophy at Paradise Valley Community College. I was a student at Arizona State University. I studied philosophy for my bachelor's degree and my master's degree at the Tempe campus a long time ago. And I've been teaching for, this is the beginning of 18 years. So a long time, probably as long as you've been alive. Is that true? Are you about 18? Wow, okay. 20? All right. It's a good age. It's a really good age. So part of what I'm going to talk to you about today is what I experienced when I was 18, 20. The larger project is a study on reason. I gave myself this 5-year project. I find it's good to make goals. And so after I graduated with my PhD, I think it's been 3 years now, I decided I need to set some goals so I keep moving forward, because by the time you get a PhD, you've developed some pretty good habits about studying and writing, so I wanted to keep going with that. So I outlined 3 things I wanted to do. One was this Retrieving Reason book, and I, with the help of some input with, running things by my friends, it's going to be called Retrieving Reason, the Foundation for Epistemology. This is just a book about what reason is and what it isn't. But I also have 2 other pieces that go with this project. The second piece is going to be a kind of historic study of what other philosophers have meant by reason. So getting quotes from the history of philosophy. So this is what Plato said about reason. This is what Aristotle said. This is what, other philosophers, Hume and Kant, and going through, and then just collecting those quotes. And then the third piece is going to be an analysis of those quotes. Like, how did we get to where we are today in our thinking about reason, given the history that's gone before? So retrieving is a kind of going back. We need to get something from the past. And so that's the bigger project. Now, the smaller project, the baby steps that I'm going to take, I'm committing to making a podcast of pieces of it, so that I have to actually sit down and write scripts, put it out there in the public, get feedback. And so this is going to be the way that I keep going. So this today is the kickoff for the podcast. So you get to be part of that. I tried this a year ago. I started the podcast. I made 3 episodes, and then I, at that time, developed a really, something was wrong with my arm, and I couldn't type. I couldn't use my arm anymore. So over the summer, I had surgery, and it was my shoulder. I had some torn muscles in my shoulder. So they repaired it, but it took another 4 months to get to where I could type again. So that kind of took away some of my energy and desire to do new things. But now I'm back, and so I am committing to doing this podcast. So if you're wondering after this meeting, what's going on, you can go to my YouTube channel. I have a YouTube channel. It's under my name, Kelly Fitzsimmons Burton. And that's where the podcast will be. But there's also fun things for students there. I'm just going to put a plug in for my vlog. I started the vlog for my students, I think, in December. And I think there's 25 videos there now. And they're short and sometimes fun, sometimes silly. So that's where these will be housed. Okay, but why do this? Right? I have kind of a cushy job, let's be honest. Being a professor, it's a lot of work, but I don't have to do this. I don't have to write. If I taught at ASU, I might have to write books and keep on top of things. But where I teach, the emphasis is on becoming a better teacher. So I don't have to do a lot of research, but I am doing it. So you might wonder, why do this? It's a lot of extra work. Why learn how to use like recording things and put things on YouTube? It's teaching an old dog lots of new tricks, and I can't keep up with it. I mean, I didn't go to school for this, but I do my best. Why? So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. I think that there's a problem, and I think that there's a solution to the problem. I'm a problem solver. So the history of philosophy seems to proceed in this way. There's a challenge, and we need to respond to the challenge. And if we don't respond to the challenge, it doesn't go away. It stays there. And so challenge and response is how the history of ideas proceeds. So I perceive a challenge in our day. And there's more than one, but there's one that drew my attention and fascinated me, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. When I was a student, when I was, 18, 19, I just assumed that we couldn't have knowledge. Nobody can really be certain about anything. And I guess I was just born into that. I don't remember ever hearing that like explicitly taught to me, but it was in the air that I breathed. You can't really be sure about anything. I ended up taking a Philosophy 101 class where I received the Reason handout. I don't know if you know the Reason handout, but this was the best handout I've ever received in my entire life. And I still use it with my students. I give it to them. I tell them, this is the best handout you're ever going to get. And if you think there's a better one, bring it to me, show it to me, I'll give you money, because this is the best. And it was the best because it gave me hope that we could have knowledge. It was a one-sided handout. I wish I brought a copy of it. I'll show you a picture. I took a picture the other day. It has 3 little pieces. The first piece, what is reason? It's just a little paragraph, less than a paragraph. Bullet points. What do we do with reason? And how is reason a part of our nature? When I was exposed to reason through this handout, it was eye-opening. It was world-opening. I was like, wow, maybe we really could know things. And I had some hope at that point. And so this handout I received from my professor, Surendra Gangadine, and he also wrote a book, I think it was published about 10 years ago now, Philosophical Foundation, a critical analysis of basic belief. You know this book?
I own this book.
You own this book. Well, in that book, he opens it up a little bit more about reason. And so this project is sort of my 25 years of thinking about the handout and the book and applying it to the problem of skepticism and fideism. It's kind of like a commentary. This is not material I came up with, but it's a way that I'm putting it together, hopefully to help my students and help young people who are struggling with the same thing I struggled with. So I went to ASU after I got the Reason handout at community college, and I was a philosophy major, and the consistent message that I got was nobody can really know for sure. You can't really have certainty. This was coming from my professors. I took a class called Skepticism, and it was just so, like, it was a challenge to me personally. Like, you're a brain in a vat, and you're being, stimulated by an evil scientist. You don't know anything. I'm like, great. I'm just a brain in the vat, and I can't know anything. So I wanted to overcome this challenge. And I always had that Reason handout with me. I was like, the Reason handout says we could know, and it seems like Socrates seems to think we could know. He was pursuing it. He died for it. And it seems like that's what philosophy's about, knowing things. But I had this other message, we can't really know. So what do you do with that? My professors at ASU seemed to recognize I was struggling with this question. And they suggested that I read Alvin Plantinga. Do you guys know Plantinga? Don't worry about it. I'll help you with Plantinga if you need. They suggested, well, this guy is a Christian philosopher who's dealt with the problems that we're talking about, and maybe you'll find a solution in his works. So when I did my master's degree, I spent 3 years reading his works and trying to find an answer to skepticism. I didn't find it there. I found a religious version, fideism. We can't really know for sure, but you just got to believe anyway. And it's because I think if you're consistent with skepticism, you realize that there is no meaning in the world. We invent meaning, and it's a fiction. I mean, we're making it up. You could live comfortably in a fiction, but when you realize, oh, this isn't true, it's kind of uncomfortable. And fideism says, yeah, that's where it leads, so we need to believe in something, even if we can't know it for sure. I wasn't comfortable with that. I wanted to know. And I thought this was what philosophy was about. So I did my master's thesis on Alvin Plantinga. I have to say Plantinga has done a lot of good work, but maybe not with giving us a kind of sureness, certainty about basic things like, does God exist or not? What is the good life? Those were the kinds of questions I wanted to answer. And I thought that there were answers out there. I just wasn't finding them in the academy. So that was my personal problem, and so maybe it's just a personal problem, right? Maybe other people don't have this problem. But I started to see, no, it's not just me, it's a huge problem. It's a problem. Skepticism is affecting all of society. And so let me give you a bigger picture, besides just, Dr. Burton's hang-ups. The two institutions of culture that are involved in teaching truth, the academy on one hand and the church on the other hand, are both saying we can't have truth. And if they're teaching everybody, and they're teaching people who are going into the professions, then that permeates all of culture. Everybody gets that view that we can't know. And if we can't know, then we're left on our own to do our own thing. What's good for you is good for you. What's good for me is good for me. How can we be united if all we have is our own thing? We're all isolated little pieces that are not united in any meaningful sense. So this is, I think, the larger problem of skepticism. It is a cultural problem. And I'm going to make a case that this is huge and we could fix it. But I have to make the case first. So here's examples of this problem as I see it. I tell my students that everything is broken. Now, one class was like, no, that's not true. And I was like, okay, let me try to show you what I mean. Everything is broken in terms of the institutions of culture. Think about the family. Is the family in general broken? Think about the economy. Not the economy like today, because the stock market's probably pretty good right now, but I'm talking about these larger discussions about whether we should head in the way of socialism or should we be capitalists, and how does this work out in terms of taking care of people who are, the lower, the 99%. We have the 1% and the 99%, and these people are, we fight over these things. Economics is broken. Think about politics. This is such a badly divided area right now. It's broken. It's almost paralyzed right now. Think of the religious institutions. We're badly divided. I think people are turning away from religion because it's so divided. We don't even know what to believe. Think of the university. You're in the university. I don't know if you've noticed this, but there's problems with the university. It's kind of broken. And I don't know, part of it is even free speech and how we talk to each other on college campuses. It seems to be we have a difficulty communicating, and we have a difficulty with bureaucracy taking over. It's like so expensive to go to school now. Why is everyone strapped with student loan debt? So this is broken. I told my friend the other day that I wouldn't be surprised if I saw the collapse of the university in my day. Now that could be me just having some, cynicism, which goes with skepticism. Cynicism is kind of hopelessness. But I wouldn't be surprised. And I think what will happen is entrepreneurs will find a way to educate people. We'll still do it. It just won't be in the same way. That's a different talk, though. So I'm just trying to show that everything is broken. And what I mean by everything is the institutions of culture. And if the institutions are broken, then culture is kind of suffering. Everyone that lives in that society is suffering. And I don't think it's just in the United States. I think it's everywhere. And we're kind of a global community now. We can see what's happening in other countries. I think other countries are also struggling with this skepticism. And I think skepticism is at the heart of this problem. We can't be united because we can't agree with one another, because we can't know together. One more piece to kind of make the case is that we can hardly understand our fellow human beings sometimes. I'll give you an example. I sometimes turn on the news, and it's often a painful experience to me because I see there are different narratives. I'll just say there's two main narratives, the left and the right, and they're using the same words, and they mean radically different things by those words. We can't understand each other. We can't even come to say, yeah, that word means that. So I call this semanticide in my book, and I got this from a guy named Thomas Sawes, who uses the word, and it's the murder of language. And I noticed that word because I feel like one of the things that happens, maybe this is deeply connected to skepticism, is that we empty words of meaning and things become meaningless. We use words over and over and over again, but they don't mean anything anymore. So semanticide is really a bad thing. And I also talk about in my book, Retrieving Knowledge, that the way to overcome semanticide is through this idea of the rectification of names. This is a Confucian idea. The rectification of names is where you properly identify things and you name them according to what they are. Identifying and distinguishing. And these Confucian philosophers thought that this is the job of philosophers, to guard the meaning of words. And I'm pretty sure this is what Socrates was involved in when he's asking these kinds of questions. Oh, you politicians, you talk about justice. What is justice? Properly identify it, because you're using the word and the way you're using it doesn't seem to be meaningful. So we need to get back to that, and that's going to be part of my project. The rectification of names is going to be kind of a method, naming things appropriately, A is A, and it's also going to be a kind of retrieval. We're going to go back and say, hey, what is reason? Can we do a rectification of the name reason? Because we use that word all the time, but we've kind of emptied that word of meaning. So we need to get back to the meaning of reason. Okay, that's my project. So the problem, skepticism and fideism, and how they have impacted us globally, I'll just say. And we're trying to have a global culture. It's not going to work without some common basis. All right, but what's the solution? This is maybe where it gets a little dicey, right? How do you solve this scale of a problem? It's a global, huge, foundational problem. Okay, I think two things. One, we have to understand what we mean by reason, and I'm going to assert that some things are clear to reason. So this idea of clarity, some things are clear to reason, is going to be a key piece. And if it's clear to all reasoners. And this gets to our capacity to understand as human beings. We have this capacity, maybe we exercise the capacity to different levels, at different levels, but we all have the capacity. And so if we wanted to see what is clear, we could, because we have the capacity. that also gets us to a corresponding concept of inexcusability, meaning if we are rational and we are exercising our reason or not, but some things are clear, we should see them. So you're a rational being, you should see what is clear. And I think we do think this is the case because we have something we'll call the ethics of belief. The ethics of belief is that when we make claims to each other, when we say, I believe this, we expect one another to back it up. We can say, prove it. And there's a philosopher named W.K. Clifford, and he says at the end of his essay, The Ethics of Belief, he says it's wrong always, everywhere, for anyone to believe anything without sufficient evidence. And I think that's a kind of, it's a huge universal claim, and sometimes I'm like, oh, there's something wrong with this, statement, but I think in general we do expect that. If you're going to make a judgment, you should be willing to back it up, and it should be true. And if it's true, then it should be knowable, right? So if it's something we can't know, if nothing is clear, then we can't hold one another responsible. We lose accountability. And maybe that's what we're seeing. We can't hold people accountable anymore because we don't have access to what's true and false. So, two pieces to the solution. Some things are clear, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. And there's no excuse for not seeing what is clear if you have the capacity to see what is clear. And we do, because we're rational beings. All right. Another piece to the solution is we have to recognize there's a problem, right? Recognize that we have a problem, and in doing that, we also have to recognize that the way we've been addressing the problem isn't really working. That definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I think that might be what we're doing in philosophy. We keep coming up with these same weird thought problems, ways of addressing issues, and we're not really finding a solution because we aren't seeing the assumptions. We aren't going deep enough, and we need to dig deeper. So part of my project, you can see I use the word foundation. I have in mind, there's a ground, and you put the foundation on the ground, and sometimes the ground needs to be really solid, and I'm not sure we're building on a solid ground. So I'm using that as an analogy. The foundation is an analogy for building something. We're going to build a civilization. We're going to build culture. It's got to be on really solid ground. So we might have to dig deeper, and this is where a deeper understanding of what reason is going to come in. So it's something old, retrieving, and it's something new, digging deeper to make it more solid. And part of the solution is that we can't fall back into skepticism, and we can't retreat into fideism, because those are like our little safe zones where we're like, oh, it's comfortable over here in my fideism, I'm going to stay here and protect myself. No, we're going to have to go, you know what, there's a problem, and we have to face that problem head on, or it's not going to go away. And yeah, when I talk about the audience, I'm going to come back to that there's a debt. The problem is like a debt, and we're just passing it on to the next generation. All right, so I've talked about the problem. I'm suggesting a solution that is clear to reason. Some things are clear to reason. I'm going to say the things that are basic in philosophy, whether God exists or not, what a human being is, what is good for a human, what is evil for a human. Those things should be clear to reason. And we have to dig deeper to get to answers. Okay, what is the goal of doing this, though? I mean, why? I'm like halfway through life, I think. Seems like I am. So why spend time doing this? Here's why. Because we need the good. Have you talked about the good in your classes yet? Oh, the good. I love to taunt people with the good. Now today I'm actually going to talk about the good because I think the good is knowledge. And if skepticism says we can't have knowledge, then they're saying you can't have the good. But it's not just knowledge simpliciter. It's knowledge of the nature of reality, all of reality, its interconnectedness, and of ultimate reality, its origin. This is what the first philosophers were after. They wanted to know, this world is knowable, it's understandable. Why? And what's the origin of this order in the world? Where did it come from? And why can we name things? Why is there the study of everything? Ology, like biology, sociology, anthropology, epistemology. What is this ology? They called it the logos. And the logos was this order in the world that they recognized. Order in ourselves. We are rational. That's our logos. And our logos fits the logos of the world. And they were like mind blown by this idea. But knowledge of that is what we need, and it's what gives us meaning. So the good as this kind of knowledge, I'm going to make a few points about it. It's continuing. This knowledge is in this lifetime while we live here. It will continue after we're gone. And I'm going to suggest you take it with you when you go. It's continuing. Knowledge is something that continues. I'll let you ponder. What does she mean by that? You can ask later. Knowledge, there's knowledge of the world and its origin is comprehensive. It covers everything. Everything, including evil. There's knowledge of evil deepens the good. And it's central. The good is central in terms of our lives. It's the source of meaning. It's the source of making choices and decisions. It's the center of our, it's what gives us purpose as individuals. But it's also central to these institutions I've spoken of. The institutions of culture need knowledge and understanding as well. I think they're broken because we've lost knowledge. We don't have knowledge of the purpose and goal of these institutions. Yeah, I mean, if we had a goal and a focus, let's say the university exists for gaining knowledge of all these different disciplines and uniting them around the goal of understanding our world and passing that cumulative understanding to the students so that they can help it to grow, that would be an organizing principle for the university, the unity of the diverse disciplines that we have. But I don't really see that happening. Okay, so the good is central. It's what organizes our lives, the institutions, and human history. The good is the center of human history. I know, you're going to have to think big now. This is my goal, is I want you to go, whoa, this just got huge. And history is important because it's the history of the search for the logos. The good is corporate. If there's this gigantic, I've been calling it the human project, this gigantic undertaking where we are understanding the entirety of what could be understood, it's going to take all of human history and all human lives, including your lives. And so I've been challenging my students to think about, what's your contribution to the good? What is your unique contribution? Maybe my unique contribution to the good is this, and passing it on. What's your contribution going to be? And it can be in any area if you think about it. I don't know, somebody made cherry bubbly water, and that's contributing to our discussion right now and keeping me going. And I don't know, it makes me feel special. It's a contribution to the good, right? I really do. I think bubbly water makes you feel special. The good is cumulative. It grows, it increases exponentially. Now, I think of it in a visual way by my cell phone. This little cell phone is a symbol of the cumulative work of humans. Not only do we have to figure out, how can we, take things out of the earth and make, the metal casing and the glass and the insides of it. I don't really know what's inside of it. But it also houses all the cumulative knowledge that we've come up with. Not really my phone, the internet. And we had to figure out how to make an internet, right? And I could use it to record this contribution and pass it on, right? So knowledge accumulates and grows. I could gain more knowledge just by Googling something. There's probably anything you want to know, you can probably look it up and find something.
But at the same point in time, if you have a bias, you can also find that bias. If you
Sure. That's why we need to use reason. We need to figure out what is reason and how can we use it. Yeah. So there's downsides to technology, but for the good, I'm thinking this is the storehouse of human knowledge. Okay, the last piece is that the good is communal. We share it, and as we share it, our own understanding grows, our knowledge grows, and other people's knowledge grows. So I'm making these little podcast episodes, and at the end I say, like, subscribe, share. And I want you to share it so that I'm growing by this very activity. You're going to ask me questions, I'm going to have to think it through, and then I'm sharing it with others, they're going to have to think it through, and so it's accumulation of knowledge. And so I'm good, this project for the good, because I want to increase the good for others. And when I increase the good for others, I also get more of it. So it's selfish. I do this so I can grow in understanding and be happy. All right, now who's the audience for this project? You are. Young people mostly. And I'll tell you why. I'm not age-centric. Is that a thing? Age-centric? It's really for everybody, but I'm writing and talking to young people because I think they're at that point in life where they're searching for meaning in a particularly pointed way. I was there. I know what it's like. You want to know. You want to get some kind of foundation for your life because you're about to start building your life, right? So I want those who are searching for meaning in a particularly pointed way where they're still fresh and flexible. You can still change your mind. Sometimes when you're older and you're invested, it's harder to change your mind, right? You've built something up and you're like, oh, I'm wrong, I have to change. But it's possible. I think young people still have optimism. They maybe have some cynicism. I see it in my students, but you're still optimistic about the possibility of change. And I see it in people being politically active. I think social justice stuff and political causes people join are because they think we need change, and maybe the only way to do that is through collective power. Politics is power. I'm going to say, no, that's not the only way. Reason is power too. And we can change probably more likely through reason than through politics. And so I'm signing up young reason activists. Is that a thing? Can we make that? Reason activists. And I think the young people are future world leaders. This is where the debt comes in. As future world leaders, you're inheriting a world that has a lot of problems. And you probably didn't create them, right? So we talk about a national debt that the young people are inheriting, money, right? And that's kind of not fair, and you're going to have to pay for things. But I think the bigger problem is you're inheriting the epistemological debt of the people that have gone for the last, I'd say, 350 years. They keep passing it forward and not dealing with it. And so I think that if we were to work together, we could address this problem and it wouldn't be a debt to the future. I think of it this way. There are these two huge mountains. One is called skepticism and one is called fideism, and I would like to see them just thrown over there into the ocean. I think we could do that. Okay? Just get rid of those two mountains. And then you know what's ahead? Clear level ground. So I'm going to say non-young people are also welcome to join this project, but you know what? I think the non-young people are going to join because they care about the young people. So that's my audience. And what is the method for addressing the problems of epistemology? I guess I didn't really define epistemology, did I? Epistemology is the area of philosophy that deals with the question, how do we know? It's the logos of knowledge. Episteme is the Greek word for knowledge. Ology is the study of, but you can think of it as also the logos of knowledge, which is the organizing principles. What is its nature? What is it not? How can we get it? And so this is the most fundamental area of philosophy. After this comes metaphysics, what is real, and ethics. How do we live? What is the good life? What ought I to do? So I'm starting with the most basic of the most basic, epistemology. And the method I'm going to use for doing this foundation is a series of contrasts. And the contrasts are going to be between A and non-A. And we get this from the law of excluded middle. Something is either A or it's non-A. And so I'm going to contrast these concepts to see, hey, you know what? There is something clear about this right here. So let me give you the broad overview. And this is what is going to take many, many podcast episodes to cover. But this is like flying over the territory. Either there are answers to basic philosophical questions, or there are no answers. It's pretty clear, right? Either we can answer these questions about God, human nature, good and evil, or we can't. I don't know if there's a middle ground between that. And I think we can know. So either knowledge of basic things is possible and there's hope, or knowledge is not possible and we're stuck with intellectual despair. So hope or despair, knowledge or no knowledge, another clear distinction. Now, drilling down a little bit further, if knowledge is possible, which I think it is, we could know basic things are clear to reason, so it's clear to reason, or nothing is clear to reason. And if nothing is clear to reason, then what I'm saying right now isn't clear either, and nothing we say is clear, and so we lose all meaning. Implication is that we should be silent and probably not do anything either, because once we make decisions, we're distinguishing A and non-A. Once we make a choice, we're making a choice between A and non-A, and that A and non-A distinction is clear. So I think we're always assuming something is clear when we're speaking and acting. All right. I think some things are clear. I think that's super obvious. All right. Now, if some things are clear, they're clear to reason, and that's where we start to explore what is reason and what is non-reason, A and non-A. Because lots of things go by the name of reason that aren't really reason. So this is where the rectification of names comes in. We have to name what reason is and distinguish it from non-reason. And there's lots of things that are non-reason, and they're fine, like emotions, like your senses, like tradition. Maybe there are some traditions that could be rational, but tradition's not reason. Okay, then we have to figure out, what do we do with reason? So we talk about reasoning, using it. We could distinguish between what is reasoning and what is not reasoning. There are lots of things we do that isn't reasoning, but sometimes we call it by that name. So reasoning and non-reasoning. And then how is reason part of our nature as human beings? So rationality. What is it to be rational? Rationality and non-rationality. We can make that distinction as well. And I think each level of these are clear. The distinction between those are clear. All right, so that's the broad overview. Let me give you one more piece to think about, and it's about being human. So I was talking about the problem, the solution to the problem, the goal, the audience, the method, But there's a human element to this. This is something humans do. We want answers, and we want to understand. So as human beings, and Aristotle says human beings are rational, political animals. As rational, we're thinkers, and as political, we live in communities. We need other human beings. And as animals, we have bodies, we have sensations, and the rational is the most basic. That's the part that rules over ourselves, our bodies. I mean, I'm hungry right now, but I'm not like running out to get food. I'm like, hey, self, food for later. The talk is now. And the political should be ruled by the rational. So reason rules in human beings. And humans have questions, basic questions, and we want answers to basic questions. Like I've been mentioning, is there a God or not? What is human nature? What is good? What is evil? These are very human questions that it's odd to not have those questions. Like if you come across a person who didn't have those questions, that would be odd. And maybe once you raise the question, they go, oh yeah, I guess I should have thought about that. All right, we're human beings with human questions. We have a human nature. We're rational. We need meaning. Every human being needs meaning. We're meaning-needing, meaning-making beings. And if you don't agree with me, that's fine. You will probably say, what do you mean? Right? And I'll say, see, that's what I'm talking about right there. We want to understand. And you can say, I'm not sure we want to understand. But if you say that, you're trying to understand. So that's the kind of beings that we are. So we want to understand. The thing is, we need the appropriate tools for doing that. And that's what this project is about. And then lastly, we're humans that live in communities with other humans. We can't avoid that. We need that. And we also need meaning collectively, corporately, for those human communities in which we live. We need unity for all those different institutions I've mentioned. We need unity in the family. We need unity in our religious institutions. We need unity in the educational institutions. We need unity in the sort of economic system and the political world. How can we do that? This centering around communities is centered around a common understanding of what is good. And if we can't even get to what is good, then there's nothing that's going to hold these together. We need a communal understanding of what is the good. Okay, so let me wrap this up. The rest of this project is going to talk about what is philosophy, what is this search for the logos, and how is that connected to reason, and why is this project talking about a foundation. So philosophy is foundational to all the other disciplines, and it's foundational in our lives, in our world and life view. But epistemology is the foundation of the foundation. It's the most basic. And so I think if we can get that first, then the rest of the world and life view that we build will have a solid foundation. Then I'm going to talk about what are some blocks to getting people to thinking about this. I've been calling this proto epistemology, which is like before epistemology or first epistemology. And this is the little videos I've been making. My vlog series is called Thinking, just thinking, because I'm noticing it's hard to get people even to start thinking. So how do we clear roadblocks to thinking? That's the first part. And then we talk about what is knowledge, how has it been understood historically, why is it that people say we can't have knowledge, and then I get into proving that some things are clear, and this discussion about what is reason in itself. And that's going to be the bulk. What is reason? What is reasoning? What is rationality? And all the things that come up as going under the name of reason and rationality, but they aren't. So that is my project. And then I end with a discussion about hope and the contrast with despair, and that maybe there's suffering in the world because we don't use reason as we ought to. So suffering could be a motivator for seeking the good. And yeah, that's where I end. Seek and you shall find. How about that? Now I'll pause. I talked a lot. Maybe now is a good time for you to ask questions. And I don't know, do you want me to record the question part? Or would you feel comfortable turning it off or leaving it on? I'm open. All right, we're going to turn it off. I want you to feel free. Yeah. No questions for the other listeners.